My name is Lauren. I live with schizoaffective disorder, and we've been bringing you guys along on a project we've been doing where we've been using the ketogenic diet and other metabolic therapies as a means of treating my mental illness. Now, some feedback that I've been getting from a lot of you throughout this process is the feeling that this all seems a little bit out of reach and inaccessible and really expensive. And so that got me thinking, well, how much does it actually cost to do keto? And, what does my budget really look like? And is it really out of reach for most people? And so in this video, we're going to be taking a look at exactly how much I spend on following the keto diet on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. And, looking at whether it is attainable for the average person. So I've been tracking everything I eat now for almost 2 months. So I have a pretty good record of the things that I consume on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. So what we did was we went to the grocery store that we usually shop for groceries at. We went to Costco. That's where we buy our groceries for our family. And we looked at exactly how much each food item that we usually purchase costs. And then we got a better idea using Chronometer, which is the app I track my foods through, exactly how much of each food I eat on a weekly basis. And then tallied that up and then divided the numbers and then did some calculations as to what percentage of the food we bought is for a given week and then what amount of money is for that given week. And we got to some totals that I will share with you. But first, I just want to share with you kind of some of the foods that I typically consume on a weekly basis. I've been sharing a lot about this more in our vlogs and especially the one where I shared what I eat in a day. But just to give you an idea, I'll kind of walk you through some of the stuff on the grocery list. So macadamia nuts, avocados, different types of cheeses, some vegetables like asparagus, broccoli, cauliflower, spinach, cauliflower rice, some berries like raspberries, organic butter, almond butter, avocado oil, and then getting more into the meats, organic ground beef, rotisserie chicken, chicken thighs, these like pre-prepared oven roasted chicken breasts that I like to eat, and then the gourmet They're called Gourmet Keto, I think is the brand bars that I like to kind of splurge on and enjoy. The Zevia colas that I like to enjoy as well. And then coconut milk, electrolytes that I drink every day, and then the various supplements that I take as well. And that was kind of the bulk of what made up the grocery list of foods that I consume or supplements and electrolytes that I consume on a weekly basis. Now, this grocery list is not going to be the same for everyone who attempts medical keto. People have different preferences. Even myself and Rob eat kind of differently following medical keto, even in the same household. And so even our grocery lists look a little bit different, but we tried to focus on the things that I eat on a weekly basis and got down my proportions and what I spend on a weekly basis. And so the breakdown of the weekly cost, and now also, I live in Canada, so these are in Canadian prices, but we will also convert these amounts to US dollars as well, because I know a lot of you live in the States. So we totaled up all of the costs for all these different foods that I mentioned on my grocery list, and what we got were a daily cost Canadian of $17.56, which translates to US $12.99. A weekly cost Canadian of $122.91, which translates to $90.95 US. And then a monthly cost of $491.64 Canadian, which translates to $363.81 US. So just a brief recap of what all that amount entails. It is the amount that I'm spending just personally on what I eat in a day, week, or month. It doesn't include the stuff that I feed my family as well. And it's also including things like choosing organic foods where I can, or it's also including things that you may not necessarily need, like the sweets or the treats that I like to enjoy, or also supplements that you may not necessarily choose to include, or that you may choose cheaper supplements than the ones that I chose as well. Now, when I saw this total, I thought it sounded pretty reasonable, but perhaps that's because I'm used to, spending money on groceries for a family of 5. So when I broke it down to just an individual budget, it seemed a lot more reasonable. But when we looked at the USDA food plans for how much an individual should spend on groceries, they kind of suggested a budget anywhere from about $240 a month to $450 a month for people aged 20 to 50. Now, this range was going from extremely low-cost food budget planning to more liberal, higher budget planning. Those are all US dollar amounts. And so just again, what my monthly breakdown of groceries for me was in US dollars was $363.81. So it is more toward the higher range, but it's not, the highest range. It's about $100 less than what the highest range that they gave was. So now some ways that you could maybe get this budget down even further are, eliminating things that you maybe don't necessarily need. So I chose some organic foods where maybe you could pick foods that aren't organic. And you could also cut out things that I buy, which are pretty expensive, like those keto bars that I enjoy. You don't need those to do medical keto. Or the Zevia sodas that I have fairly regularly. You also don't need those to do medical keto. In fact, it's probably better to not have those in your diet. And so my daily, weekly, and monthly expenditures when I get rid of organic products and substitute them for non-organic, and when I get rid of the keto bars and Zevia drinks, my daily total was $13.85 Canadian or $10.25 US. Weekly was $96.96 Canadian or $71.75 US. And my monthly total was $387.84 Canadian or $287 US. Now that is far, far closer to, I think, the lowest range that the USDA recommended for a food budget for an individual aged 20 to 50 was $240. And so a budget of $287 is really close to that kind of lower end of the budget planning. And so I think that that is fairly affordable. And also keep in mind, from this adjusted total of $287 US, that's still including the supplements that I take. So you can knock that price down even further by maybe not including supplements and electrolytes in your repertoire or finding cheaper options of those supplements and electrolytes. Now, one thing about my totals is that I did do my grocery shopping at Costco, which is a bulk food store. And so the prices of the foods that I was getting were inherently lower because I was buying them in bulk. And so that is perhaps a barrier to people who have less disposable income to spend on more upfront cost on groceries that will ultimately make it cheaper in the long run, which is quite unfortunate. So it probably would look a little bit more expensive from a regular grocery store than Costco, which is where I grocery shopped. But that said, in terms of diving into more budgeting options, it is kind of nice to kind of bulk buy, especially meats, and then divvy them up, proportion them up, and freeze them. That's a great way to kind of reduce costs in the long run. I know that there's more of an upfront cost to buying more in the beginning, but it does save money over time if you are able to do that. Some other ways to cut costs from the budget or the grocery list that I recommended. I don't really eat eggs, but Rob does. Rob really enjoys it, and they're a great source of protein and fat. And they're kind of a cheaper source of those things as well. So that's kind of something that you could maybe substitute some of your more expensive meats with if you're on a tighter budget. Like I already mentioned, it's more affordable to not buy organic products, and maybe that's something that you forego in an effort to save more money. And then another way to keep costs down as much as possible is looking for proteins or meats or sources of fat that are cheaper. So of all the proteins that I had on my grocery list, the cheapest was rotisserie chicken. I think it was like $6.66 Canadian per kilogram, which came to like $7.99 for a whole rotisserie chicken. And so once you divvy that up into different meals, it's actually really quite affordable. So trying to stick to things like that, or even deli meats can be a more affordable option. Having them in lettuce wraps with mayo was something that I ate a lot in the beginning, and that's a good, more affordable option too. And then, of course, there's shopping for deals. Oftentimes when products are about to expire or are getting close to their expiry date, they'll be marked down. And so keeping an eye out in the grocery store for items like that, where you might be able to cut additional costs. Now, I just want to share some of my own experience of switching to a keto diet and grocery shopping for that, as opposed to how we were doing our grocery shopping before. I think that it's being more, I don't like to use the term restricted, but kind of focused in terms of the foods that I'm eating and thus buying. It's made me more aware of what I'm actually going to consume. And thus, I think we've had a lot less food waste since switching to keto. And so saving money in terms of not spending money on things that we're just throwing out. I think we also bought a lot more processed foods and whatnot, which added to our budget and our cost. We also spent a lot more on produce like vegetables and whatnot, which we don't necessarily have to spend nearly as much on anymore. And before switching to keto, a really big piece of our food budget went toward eating out and eating, not home-cooked food. So we have a credit card that is specifically for eating out. It gives you cash back or whatever at restaurants and stuff. And so it's very easy for us to see how much we were spending on eating out or on, buying food outside of the home like that. And every month it was around 350 to 500 Canadian dollars for the month. Now, that is including eating out for a family of 5, but it probably was myself and Rob who had the bulk of that expenditure, whether it was eating out as a family, whether it was going out on a date night out for dinner or whatever it may be, picking up coffees every now and then, or we got into the habit a lot of having a really big productive work day and then feeling the need to treat ourselves with ordering skip the dishes or going out for a treat lunch or whatever. And it is wild how quickly those little expenditures add up. We were spending an extra $350 to $500 per month on this. And now our bill for that credit card is virtually zero, maybe a few dollars here and there for picking up a black coffee every so often. But really, we've cut that cost almost completely out of our budget. That also included expenditures like alcohol. Even if you're buying a bottle of wine a week to share as a couple or whatever it may be, that's like $80 a month that you are just not spending anymore on the keto diet because alcohol is no longer a part of your repertoire or your diet. Now, of course, I wasn't spending $350 to $500 on just myself. Again, that was for a family of 5. But we kind of estimated that it would be easy to guess that I was spending probably around $150 a month on things like eating out or alcohol or those various types of expenses like that I just don't have anymore. I think there's this assumption that when you're following a medical keto diet, you have to spend exorbitant amounts of money on all these specialty food items and whatnot. But I hope that kind of running you through what my grocery list entails and what I spend in a month, a week, and a day kind of helps to dissuade that assumption that, you really don't. You're eating whole foods, but you don't really need these specialty items and whatnot. You are spending a lot more time, or maybe not a lot more time, but more time preparing food because you can't reach for those processed, ready to go pre-made items anymore. But I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, and that's not adding to your cost at all. There's something to be said about the convenience of fast food, and I think most people reach for it a lot more often than we should. And it's hard to notice, I guess, how much those expenditures here and there add up over time to be a large proportion of our food budget. So that was kind of a breakdown of my budget for food. And that is probably the biggest cost as it pertains to medical keto. But hopefully I've shown that the cost for following a diet on medical keto really is not that much different than a typical diet. In fact, I think we're actually spending less now following the keto diet than we were on groceries before. There are a few additional costs, though, that it takes to kind of follow medical keto, and that's particularly around ketone monitoring. Now, I've shown a lot of different monitors that I'm using throughout this process, and the only reason that I'm doing that is for testing purposes and trying to be as thorough as possible in this project that I'm sharing on the internet with all of you. But you really, really do not need all of the monitors that I'm using. You could even get away with just the urine test strips that show you kind of a range of where you are ketone-wise and if you're in ketosis or not, just based on peeing on a strip. And those, I think we picked up a pack of 100 strips for $10. So that's pretty budget-friendly, I think. If you want to take a step further and go for what we recommend in terms of ketone testing, it's the Keto Mojo, which is the blood ketone monitor as well as the glucose ketone monitor. And this even isn't really that expensive either. I think it costs about $45 for the actual device, but they have a bunch of different packages and whatnot that you can get started with. But the breakdown of the test strips that you need each time you test is usually about $1 a test strip. So that's $45 upfront for the device. And then let's say you test when you're starting out twice, maybe 3 times a day, just to get an idea of where your ketones are at. Once you're more stable, you could probably test once a day. And then once you get to a point of prolonged stability and you kind of know your ketone production and you know how you're feeling, you probably don't even need to test at all anymore. And you can go based off more of how you feel. So it really isn't a prolonged cost, and it can be done with a budget in mind as well. So I hope this breakdown of my own budget as it pertains to following medical keto was helpful. And I hope that it helped to show that it probably doesn't cost as much as you think. And if you are on a tighter budget, there are many, many ways where you can still meet your nutritional goals while spending less than what I'm spending. So if cost was a barrier or a perceived barrier to medical keto that was holding you back, I hope this has helped to kind of abate some of those worries and encourage you to give it a try yourself. Of course, under the medical supervision of your care team. Thank you so much for watching this. And as always, wishing you and your loved ones good health. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.